Oh, kia ora koutou, Paul from Midwave Breaks here. So with Bruce and I recording a bunch of new tunes, this is a deeper dive chat behind the scenes about how we record the drums for our tracks, with a bit of a yarn from my days as a professional drummer. This video is mainly because we've posted a bunch of footage of our studio space on our socials recently, and some people might see the setup that we have and think, hang on a minute, call yourselves a rock band, what is this? A center for ants? Traditionally, recording drums typically takes a lot of time and money because of what's needed. Firstly, you need a good drum kit that sounds great, and importantly, sounds the way you want it to sound for that particular recording. You need the right space or room in which to place those drums, and ideally you have good microphones to capture the sound of each part of the kit at a high quality. And each of those different factors has a huge range of variables. This is still a beautiful and traditional way to record drums if that is available. However, the raw sound that you have to work with to mix is very reliant on and somewhat limited to mainly those factors. Another thing that can be a big influence in the studio setting is a mixing console, the desk where the sounds from the microphones come into, as I'll talk about in a bit. Yes, you can add all sorts of effects to the raw sound, and inevitably you do as part of the final mix, but the building blocks of the sound are mainly determined by all these factors. Nowadays, computer software allows us to access that level of professional drum sound using samples without the need to set it up ourselves. And by samples, I mean actual recordings of real drums recorded in some of the best studios in the world with super fancy microphones in all sorts of configuration. So now, when we're in the spare room studio at Bruce's house, if we're looking for a particular kind of drum sound, we can literally dial it up using software because someone else has taken the time to professionally sample all these drum kits in a whole variety of ways. So herein lies the yarn. Now, I did this myself as a session drummer when I was younger at a place called York Street Studios in Parnell. It's a big studio in the 90s, famous for bands like Supergroove, She Had, The Feelers, Garageland, so many bands. York Street had a really sought after drum sound. Because of a particular mixing desk that they had. You may have seen the documentary Sound City with Dave Grohl, which explores the life of a very specific mixing console called a Neve. It's an old analog mixing desk. There's only a handful of them handmade around the world, and it became famous for having a very particular influence on the drum sound. You hear it in bands from Fleetwood Mac, Tom Petty, Rage Against the Machine, and Foo Fighters. And York Street famously had one of these Neve desks. So there was an American producer who came to New Zealand to capture drum sounds for a sample library using this desk at York Street. And I was the session guy who played all of the kits. This guy brought with him like two super fancy valve mics, which on their own were worth something ridiculous, like $250,000 or something. It was him as the producer, and with him he had two Mac engineers whose job was just to sit there and catalogue and file each and every sample sound as it came in. So we had some different drum kits lined up in the hallway, an old school vintage 1960s Slingerland drum kit, classic 1970s Ludwig, and at the time a new school modern DW kit. And for about 2 weeks, I think it was, we sampled every sound from each setup from top to bottom. It was a very painful and laborious process, as you can imagine, individually capturing every different kind of sound you could make from each of these setups. And not just with sticks, we did each configuration with brushes, then mallets, and then hot rods or multi-rods. The worst one is when you're capturing cymbals hits, right? Because they ring out, there's a long delay. And it would have been quite a ridiculous picture, actually, of me on my own in the big room at York Street doing one solitary cymbal hit of a particular velocity and then just trying to keep like super still, making sure I didn't breathe too loud or cough or bump into anything until the sound had completely died out. Which, if you're using a big cymbal, you can imagine the sound would sometimes ring out for like almost 30 seconds. It was ridiculous. So it was a pretty crazy experience, but I did get paid well, so I can't complain. Fun fact, that producer made his money from writing the theme music to Walker, Texas Ranger, which was a Western TV action series featuring Chuck Norris. And he was also part of the team responsible for the original Battlestar Galactica series sound effects. So, back to our current setup. The electric kit that I have is there to digitally capture or map my performance of the drum part as I play it. And then we use the software to overlay real drum samples. A good way to understand the process is to think of motion capture for movies. I'm like Andy Serkis playing Gollum or Caesar in Planet of the Apes, which is somewhat ironic, as I've been told I often look like a monkey when I'm performing, and also my daughter sent me a picture not long ago of how much she thinks I look like Andy Serkis. Yeah, you know, the guy who's mostly known for his romantic lead and action hero roles. The specific kit I use is a Roland TD17KV. It's an intermediate level electric kit. It's not the fancy flagship model. It's a mid-price setup because ultimately it doesn't matter about the onboard sounds because we don't use them. It doesn't matter about the look because we don't use an E-kit for playing live shows. But what it does do is it strikes the balance of being good enough tech to capture the full dynamic range of what I play. If you're a drummer, you'll know what I mean. A kick or bass drum and toms don't have a lot of dynamic nuance. Where you need that dynamic range is mainly in the snare drum because of the subtle in-between or ghost notes and the kind of crack around the edge of the rim, which I do quite a lot. You also need it in hi-hats because you want to differentiate all those spaces between an open and a closed sound, and you want a smooth transition. And the other one that's really important is the ride cymbal, because it has a wide range of expression between the center, the edge, or the belt. It is amazing how things have changed, because back when I was a full-time session drummer, there's no way I would even consider using an electric drum kit for a professional recording. That would be total sacrilege, because basically at that time they sucked. But it's like the director James Cameron, when he talked about the first Avatar movie, he said that he had the idea for the story years before, but the technology literally didn't exist to be able to make it at that time. In that way, the progression of E-kit technology is similar to movie motion capture. Early Gollum, for example, was groundbreaking at the time when it came out, but compared with Caesar from a recent Planet of the Apes or Avatar 2, for example, early Gollum actually looks a bit clunky now. But hey, all of those things are a massive leap forward from that animated dude in Dire Straits' Money for Nothing video, right? So the key question for us as far as recording on an E-kit is, does it sound like me? Short answer is yes, which is why two dudes from Tauranga can record kick-ass sounding rock drums in a spare room of a farmhouse. Hope that helps. Deep dive chat. If you've made it this far, you've done very well. Cheers.